Hello everyone, as you can see I'm not in my usual spot, the posters are not behind me, and that's because we've essentially remodeled our whole basement to make room for our post-surgical elderly pet that we're caring for. So he's got the majority of the space, I'm here on my couch, I'm in a blanket, but I'm still doing an album review because I'm due one and y'all have been patient and I wanted to jump back into it. Today we are doing The Weeknd's Dawn FM, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with The Weeknd's work, and it really has been this way since House of Balloons onward, it's just been turned to a more kind of pop, groovier, retro synth direction than the earlier R&B work. It's groovy, it makes you want to get up and dance at a slower or a quicker pace, but lyrically the content is very existential and dark and brooding. So it's like I'm gonna get up and glide around on the dance floor or strut or really move, but it's groovy and I'm grooving because I'm a drug addict with absolutely no prospects in life and I just do this to numb out my emotions until I inevitably die. The Dawn FM project can be interpreted as an immediate follow-up to After Hours. One of the final tracks in After Hours is Sleep, which can very much be interpreted as a metaphor for dying. And there's a slow, majestic sense of relief when that sleep or death arrives. And Dawn FM begins with a notion of afterlife. Specifically, is there an afterlife? What is it about? How do we manage the past that we've left behind? And how do we move forward to hopefully something better? And we'll find that this album actually does have a reasonably bright message, which for The Weeknd is pretty surprising. The opening track is fittingly titled Dawn FM, and it features a speaker who appears to be walking into death, and he says, I do this part I do alone, and I'm wondering if after I die, is it nothingness? Is it oblivion? And then we get the radio portion, which is narrated by Jim Carrey, which is super cool. And he essentially says, hey, nothing to be afraid of here. We're just going to sit back, relax, enjoy the transition. There's nothing to worry about. Listen to some music and finally peel back all those layers of difficulty that you've been dealing with and carrying for too long of a time. This track poses some very important ideas, and I'll put them in the form of two questions. The first question is, what is the nature of the afterlife? That's the first question that our speaker asks. And then secondly, why are we hearing about it in the form of a radio station? And we'll build on those as we go. The next track, which allows us to fade into an accelerated funky groove, is Gasoline, and it's also very important for our future understanding of the album. It shows a relationship between a man and a woman that is extremely dysfunctional, in which they do things like drugs, there's some strangulation, maybe some freaky sex involved, and essentially they just stick around with each other because, quote, we're both insane. We both have no idea how to deal with the circumstances in life that we're dealing with, so we stick around each other because of things like you won't let me overdose on drugs. What's another very important aspect of this song is in the second verse, in the discussion of nihilism. The male speaker admits, like, I'm nihilist, I don't really think there's anything after life, and life sucks specifically because kindness is a zero-sum game. He talks about the zero sum of tenderness. In other words, we give kindness, we try to do good things for people, but we don't get any of it back. We lose the energy that we give, and then other people just get it, and it's a zero-sum game. This is such a common critique of the nature of life that it can be summarized in the common phrase, no good deed goes unpunished. And so what you end up with, and in the chorus he talks about, when I die, just dump gasoline on my body and burn it because nothing matters anyway. What you get is a view of life where if what we give we don't get back, And if we're just trying to fill that void and the general void of life with stimulation of some kind, be it drugs, sex, just trying to make the heartbeat beat, as the speaker says, then everything's pointless, and any energy invested is just bouncing off the walls of this perpetual existential prison. See, I told you it was groovy, but then you get down to the lyrics and you're like, oh, maybe not. And lastly, I know this is a lot of time for one track, but I have to bring up the faith piece. He talks about grappling and trying not to lose his faith again, which he's done in several other tracks on several different pieces of work. And since many aspects of this album remain faith based, that will come up in future discussions as well. Next, we have the song How Do I Make You Love Me? And this song is about a guy who fixes mushroom tea or LSD for someone he wants to love him so that they can both essentially hallucinate and feel some relief from reality. And he mentions that she has a troubled past, he most likely also has a troubled past, and he's just really desperate to get her to want him, to love him, to feel the spark of that connection. And this song's focus is mainly escapism. The speaker even admits it's unusual to beg for approval this way, to need it desperately, but I need it, and I want this love to last forever, and I just want to have a perpetual wellspring of escapism that I can draw on whenever I need. Take My Breath, the next track, describes a romantic slash sexual encounter if you word that encounter in such a way that it sounds very much like self-sacrifice and death. The speaker talks about how the woman coming to him is very much like a sacrifice, and the chorus, take my breath away and make it last forever, can very much be interpreted as kill me, please. There's the implication subtly of a kind of near-death fantasy that the woman or both of them have, and they're very much living on the edge in their carrying out of whatever this encounter is. There's not a tremendous amount of detail, but the speaker also mentions, you're way too young to end your life, and I don't want to be the one who pays the price. So, whatever it is that they're doing, it's demonstrating the lengths to which they will go to escape and to feel some kind of social or mutual bonding despite the distress. The next track is called Sacrifice, and two things. Number one, it's unclear if we're continuing off of the same relationship we've been talking about for a few tracks now, or if all of these are different. Some people seem to believe that it's the same and that it's an evolving dynamic. Other people suggest that it's different every time, or that it's a kind of just a nebulous scenario. But secondly, you cannot hear the bass line when this song starts and not do this. In this song, the speaker's essentially saying, I can't sacrifice who I am to make you happy. I grew up in this city. If he is referring to Toronto, because The Weeknd grew up in Toronto, if he is referring to Toronto, then this cold, frigid city just made me hard and stoic inside. And I also have a history of drug use, and that stuff isn't just going to leave me. And you can't really fix me yourself. So don't think that we're going to have this genuinely 100% loving relationship, because I'm always going to stay true to myself, as dark as that is, rather than sacrifice that for your sake and for the sake of whatever you believe this relationship is. After this moment, we get the interlude, A Tale by Quincy, and the Quincy here is Quincy Jones. And he relates a story of his mother getting taken out of his house at a young age, and how that affected his ability to form relationships of any kind, having not had a stable mother figure. And he ends the interlude by saying, looking back is a bitch, isn't it? And one, yes. Two, he's touching on two things here. Number one, within the context of the afterlife in this sense appears to be more about looking forward, of just easing into the transition and trying to let go of past regrets rather than micro-examining all of them. And number two, and he mentions this in the interlude as well, looking back at life and at the mistakes we make, there are often subconscious things going on that we don't even realize that lead us to act in the way that we do. And that just goes to show you that many people are inherently broken, that things that happen to us imprint on us in ways we don't even realize until we've already made the mistakes. So don't hold yourself overly accountable or become nihilistic because of that inevitability. Just try to do the best you can without looking back too hard. Because Quincy has kind of reached an understanding with himself, which, although painful, is accepting, whereas the Weeknd's characters really have not. They're very much still in the toil of trying to figure out what on earth they're doing and are kind of miring in hopelessness. Our next track following the interlude is Out of Time, and as the title would suggest and as the interlude has prepared us for, it is about a regret. The speaker has been working on himself. He's realized, I did some things and said some things in the past when we were together that are because of traumas that I didn't know how to deal with at the time. But now I can't fix anything because you love somebody else and I'm out of time. And as much as I would want to, there's just no going back now. I can't go back and undo any of it. The track ends with our radio broadcast coming back in. Remember Jim? He's here to remind us that we're about halfway through the album, and to specifically reference that the afterlife he was sponsoring at the beginning is a freedom from fear and guilt and shame and past regrets, to a point where it may even just wipe out your memory completely as you prepare to spend an eternity in the afterlife. We'll touch on that again as we keep going, but as of right now, we've touched specifically on past actions, suffering, hopelessness, and specifically regrets. And now we're going to move into how can we deal with those regrets and what can we expect in the afterlife. The next track, continuing our theme of relationships, is Here We Go Again, and it's about the speaker falling in love even when he doesn't want to fall in love. He mentions his luxurious lifestyle, his record label, and a girl falling for him because she originally wanted to make her boyfriend jealous, but now that she's had sexual relations with the speaker, she's sort of fallen for him, and here we go again. We're getting back into another relationship that's probably going to fail. It's notable that The Weeknd has had 2 failed relationships with Selena Gomez and Bella Hadid, so this could be an offhand reference to himself as well and his anxious love life. This all flows back into our notion that love might just be something that's sort of superficial. Tyler, the Creator's verse has to do with, we say we're going to love each other forever, but that might really not be the case, and you need to sign this prenuptial agreement because it just might not work out how we say it's going to work out now. In other words, while love might be worth it and might be positive in a way, it is probably not everything that we've cracked it up to be, and probably not the eternal, life-altering bond that we'd love to believe it is. We follow that up with the song Best Friends, which, if we're continuing on our motif of dysfunctional relationships or shots at love, is a song about a relationship that's kind of friends with benefits, and that the speaker really doesn't want to turn into an actual relationship because he's like, it's just going to fail again. Why would we do that? Why would we ruin this when what we have is secure? Our next chapter is There Someone Else? ? And I think this song doesn't play off the relationship from the first, or not the first track, but the most recent track, but I could be wrong. And here, the speaker is saying, I think that you're cheating on me, and I don't want to be the person that I was, where I was hanging out with multiple girls, doing drugs all the time, and not being faithful. I'm trying to be a better person. So I'm going to hold you accountable this time and say, are you lying to me? Because I don't want to be involved in a situation where I'm hurting myself, you, and the other person. That's just not what I'm about. And this relates back to our notion of dawn or the afterlife in terms of I'm trying to be a better person now because I've seen my past, and rather than look back in mire and hopelessness, I'm going to stay grounded in the present and try to be better at this moment, which, not like the speaker is dead in this moment, but if our notion of the afterlife is starting to lean towards move on from past regrets, look forward to the future, look into the light, then that's what the speaker's trying to do here. Our next track is Starry Eyes, and we fade out of Is There Someone Else into this song. And this song is important because it brings to a head the two themes that we've been going on, the themes of miring in hopelessness and being attracted to similarly broken people versus moving on and trying to be a better person. And here, it's basically a description of a guy who's like, I'm going to help you. I can see how broken you are. I can see the trauma, and I want to help you. But then when it comes to me and when it comes to meeting my needs, you can just totally screw me over. Like, just kick me to the curb. Just get it over with. I'm invested in you, but I'm not even remotely invested in myself. And that is a strong notion within his idea of trauma bonding. This idea of my trauma doesn't really matter, but at least I can help you because I kind of see myself in you, but I have no regard for myself. So in other words, he hasn't moved on from his own past, his own shame, his own struggles. He just sees himself in these other people and wants to give them what they need without giving himself what he needs. And that's the main door that's kept him from this kind of better afterlife, is the trauma bond as opposed to moving on. Okay. Now we have our second interlude, Every Angel is Terrifying, and there's a lot here, so give me a moment. We're going to start with the first piece, which is a poem that I forget exactly who the author is off the top of my head, but it's a direct quotation from what I believe is a German poem. And it's essentially juxtaposing like how beautiful and amazing angels are with the inherent kind of dazzling horror of the idea of perfect holiness, of absolute beauty that the Christian idea of heaven is supposed to represent. That juxtaposition, that kind of terror that anyone would feel upon comprehending that, fades into a radio ad for that afterlife. It's amazing, it's super cool, it's beyond anything that you could possibly expect. It's like it's being sold to you now over the radio after you've just been told how ridiculously terrifying the whole prospect is. And there are two phone numbers at the end, one of which, the first one, the 414 number, is apparently a United States sex hotline, and the second one is the caller identification number that will just read back whatever number you called from so that you can know what phone you're calling from. And I think all of this is interesting in a number of ways. Let me break it down. So, the afterlife fundamentally is a frightening concept. You have to die to get there, and if you're a Christian, the only thing you really know to expect is absolute, unadulterated holiness and to exist in the presence of that, and perhaps to be judged by it. So, being frightened by something like that is a natural expectation. Meanwhile, the outside world essentially tries to sell you on that, either in the way of like, don't worry about your life choices, it'll be fine because there's just an afterlife anyway and everything will be joyful and you'll be forgiven, etc. Or in the idea of, you need to secure this now and you should be afraid because you need to totally right your own ship and life choices so that you'll be prepared for the absolutely mind-blowing purity that is heaven or just generally the afterlife. And so it is sort of like you're being sold on this idea of either completely fixing yourself and making yourself entirely upright or just letting yourself go. And so this idea, when framed in in a capitalist perspective, makes the afterlife seem like the song suggests, sexy, provocative, just wild beyond anything you can imagine. And so it frightens you, but it's being sold as a kind of gentle or harsh reassurance, depending on how you take it. With regards to the sex hotline return call number thing, I think that there's two things going on there. Number one, I think that you can either see the afterlife and the prospects of it as something being sold to you as an idea, as something you have to, as an action item, or you can see it as reflecting upon yourself in a way where I try to get right with myself so that I'm prepared for any sort of afterlife, or I'm just prepared to let go of the idea of life generally when my time arrives. I think it also has to do with our speaker here. Does he want to just go back to sex and drugs and the life that he knew that was completely escaping any kind of self accountability? Or does he want to start looking at himself and being who he wants to be, kind of like he was thinking about on Is There Someone Else? The next track is Don't Break My Heart, and this relationship seems a little bit different in a way, and I can't really tell if it's for better or for worse. What's for sure is that this relationship definitely makes him feel good, but he's also very much emotionally on edge. All of the trauma and the ups and downs of all of his past experiences have left him at a point where he's like, I don't know if I can take another heartbreak. So if I'm willing to get into this, it's pretty much all or nothing. I have to commit, and I have no idea what I'm going to do after all of this happens. The next track is I Heard You're Married, which may have to do with the relationship from the previous track, but it's really just more romantic tension, this time surrounding somebody who is already married, and the speaker's like, well, crap, now I don't want you to hurt him or to have to fight between me and him, and why don't you just love me? I don't like that you're in another relationship. And it has a Wayne feature as well, which doesn't really expand on the topic, but essentially it's just more infighting and an inability for people to be genuine with each other and to avoid getting with people that are willing to do these things or are broken in other ways. Our penultimate song is Less Than Zero, and this is interestingly a guitar-y song where the speaker essentially admits, and I think this is a culmination throughout the whole album, he says, look, I can't really get away entirely from who I am. This is what I built myself up to be. This reflects my upbringing and my past traumas. I've been unfaithful again, and as much as I try, there's a part of me that's probably just going to be this way, whether it's the infidelity, whether it's the going around with multiple women at once, whether it's the drugs, whether it's the hopelessness or attraction to broken people, that's just gonna be this way. And if that's inherently unacceptable, which he's pretty sure it is, then that makes him less than zero. And he says, I can't save you from that. I can't save you in the end from who I am. Our last track is really an epilogue by Jim Carrey called Phantom Regrets by Jim. And he explains that a lot of the concepts our speaker has been facing over the course of the album are essentially phantom regrets, similar to phantom limbs or the imagined limb you still have after you have something amputated. When you're cut off from life, if your regrets kind of keep your soul or your spirit trapped in the past pain of your former existence, then by releasing them and by just being willing to be yourself in the moment, you can find a way to let those go. In other words, he talks about flowers. He says flowers don't try to look right, they just open themselves and turn to the light. And this is the battle that our speaker's been trying to fight the whole time, especially in terms of Less Than Zero. He can't get over the past or what he wants for the future or the inevitable dread of a nihilist worldview. And Jim here is saying that to be at peace with oneself in death, to finally get the peace that you're searching for, the comfort that you're searching for, you have to be willing to drop anything outside of just who you are in this moment, accepting the chaos, the brokenness of all of that that comes with it, and just trying to build back something genuine and something better. So, to answer those first two questions we posed at the beginning, number one, what is the nature of the afterlife? In this case, it's not just darkness, as our nihilistic speaker first thought and echoed through Gasoline and other tracks. It's recognition and reconciliation. This is who I am. These are the ways in which I am broken, but these are the things I can let go and try to have a more genuine, more pleasant, and more peaceful existence. Secondly, why a radio station? Well, radio stations travel at the speed of light, the radio waves do, or near the speed of light, and they can go out over vast distances. So it implies this kind of universal broadcasting message of no matter where you are, no matter your circumstance, no matter all of the brokenness you think you carry with you, this message will be here to guide you perpetually, 24/7, wherever you are, into a state of acceptance and meaningful self-recognition and reconciliation, where you can start to build on who you are in the present rather than lament all of the other elements and pieces parts of the human condition. So it really does end on a brighter note than you thought it would, and on that note, that's the album. I hope you enjoyed the analysis. I'll be getting a poster for it soon, and take care, everybody.